These are 5 mistakes that are causing you chronic lower back pain. If you're wondering why you should listen to me, why you should listen to this young man who, yeah, I don't know what it's like. I'm gonna find out when I'm older, when I'm your age. Then I just want you to know, I'm the founder of DefaultKings.com. We've worked with over 502 men, and we are a Christian fitness coaching company that helps men lose weight and keep it off. And one of the most common side effects or secondary issues that is dealt with when working with all these men who need to lose weight is back pain, partially due to the weight that's pulling them forward from their guts, that's the guts that's yanking them into that bent back position, but also due to the sedentary lifestyle, due to the inactivity. And so back pain is something that we commonly deal with. And myself, I've actually torn a spinal erector muscle. Okay, so a spinal erector muscle is the muscle, one of the muscles that literally keeps your spine erect. Okay, spinal erector, it keeps your spine straight. And I've torn one of those. It was a terrible injury where my back was purple and swollen to the point where it was like 3 times the size on one side. And I had sciatica for 6 months. I couldn't feel my foot for 6 months. It was terrible. And so I know what back pain is like. I know what chronic back pain is like, okay? And so a lot of this stuff I learned from Tim Tebow's physical therapist, Ray Lynch. And a lot of this stuff I learned from trial and error and also studying kinesiology and working with all the men that I've worked with. So here are 5 of the most common mistakes I see that keep men stuck in this chronic back pain cycle. One of the subtle common mistakes is wearing running shoes and dress shoes all day long. Running shoes and dress shoes provide either A, too much support on your feet, or B, they restrict your actual natural toe spread, your natural foot movement. And that weakens your foot. And a weaker foot creates instability at the foundation. And because your foot's unstable, that destabilizes your knee. And if we work up the chain, if your knee is unstable, that destabilizes your hip. And when your hip is unstable, because your hip and spine movement are so integrated, that unstable hip forces the spine and the muscles that surround the spine to have to overcompensate, which a lot of time causes that over tightness and that back pain. So instead of always wearing running shoes and dress shoes, invest in some sort of zero drop barefoot shoe. My favorite brand is Vivo. These are the shoes that I use for lifting and training, but they're extremely flexible and pliable, and you can almost feel like your foot is capable of grabbing the ground like with your toes when you wear these. Barefoot shoes were a big thing years ago, and they had like the toe shoes, the Vibrams, and people who wore those just looked super weird. I kind of think that's, somewhat based now, but these actually look somewhat aesthetic. For casual wear, my favorite brand is Witten, and they make these shoes that are, again, zero drop barefoot. These have a little bit more support, and they're not quite as flexible, but still super flexible. And they have that wide toe box for the natural toe spread. And then if you're like, Gabe, I really enjoy running, you just said don't wear running shoes, then what I would do is I would go with Ultra. I actually wear these if and when I do run, which is not very often. And I wear these when I go on like really long walks or I go on hikes and stuff like that, because these actually do have a little bit more support, but this support is zero drop. So there's no actual arch support. It allows your foot to do the work and your foot to have the strength. And these have that wide toe box to make room for your natural toe spread. So these are running shoes without the downfalls of running shoes. Again, these are Ultras. And there's a bunch of other great brands out there. I'm not partial to any of the brands, but those are the 3 main ones that I use right now. And I'm definitely going to continue to branch out and try out other things like Earth Runners, and there's a bunch of other brands out there. They're coming out like crazy now. And the cool thing is that because of capitalism, we're demanding more aesthetic barefoot shoes. They're becoming more and more aesthetic over time. So if you feel like they look kind of weird, then just give it some time. They'll continue to look a little bit better over time. The second mistake people make is sitting for longer than 6 hours a day. So what happens when we sit down for too long is our bodies are kept in this hip flexed position. Hip flexion is when our upper leg bone moves in front of our body. This is hip flexion right here. And when we're in hip flexion, even if we're in hip flexion passively because the chair is putting us in hip flexion, when we sit down and my upper leg bone comes in front of my body, even though that's passive and we're not trying to do it, the chair's putting us there, we're still having our hips flexed. These muscles, these hip flexor muscles right here that run all up and down this area of your body, they tighten up regardless if we're doing it on purpose or if we're just sitting down. And when we're sitting for too long, those hip flexors are staying too tight. They start to yank on the structures in the lower back, and that can cause some issues and some tightness and pain. So instead of sitting all day, invest in a standing desk. That's what I have. I lift this thing up for pretty much every single call that I take, so it's periodically throughout the day. And then don't be afraid to go for a 3 or 10 minute walk in between work tasks, right? That little transition period where you're coming off of a call or wrapping up a task where you might be like, okay, what do I do next? Or, you might pick up your phone, just go for a walk, 3-10 minutes, loosen up the hip flexors. allow your body to relax those hip flexor muscles so they're not yanking on all the structures in your lower back. The third mistake that might seem counterintuitive is never lifting heavy. See, it's not lifting heavy that causes back pain, it's lifting heavy with bad form that causes back pain. So what I recommend is in the beginning, as you're learning form, as you're learning proper execution of exercise, yes, decrease the risk variable and use lighter weights. But once you have those movement patterns down, once you feel like you learned how to ride the bike, you do need to push the pedal. You do need to lift heavier. It's quite literally that challenge, that controlled heavy lifting in a controlled environment that's going to train your body to keep your spine straight and stable. Because if you're capable of keeping your spine straight with, a 300-pound deadlift for a few reps, then you're not going to hurt your back by bending over to tie your shoe, right? That's when most of these weird back injuries happen anyway. A lot of times it's not as catastrophic as like, oh my gosh, I was deadlifting 500 pounds and I tore a muscle in my lower back. Or it's not as catastrophic as one of the guys who I work with, named Shay. He literally had like a paratrooping accident and hurt his back. Like, it's not always that dramatic, right? A lot of times it could just be like a sneeze, right? Or like you go to pick up your pencil the wrong way or your pen the wrong way and you're like, what the heck just happened? Or you pick up the groceries the wrong way. If you train your back to be able to remain stable under these heavy loads, then those extraneous variables in daily life won't be as stressful. The fourth mistake that I see guys make is defaulting to getting massages. And I want to make sure that there's context here, because massages aren't inherently bad. They don't actually hurt your back. Getting massages, the actual practice of getting massages can keep you in chronic back pain, because massages only provide temporary relief. Massages are a passive stimulus. That means that somebody else or some other external factor is actually doing the work on your body tissue to cause the change in your body tissue. And whenever we have a passive stimulus, that change, that tissue change, that loosening of the muscles, that's what I mean by tissue change, that is only temporary. And so the relief from a massage on your lower back only lasts as long as it took to get it. It only lasts as long as the massage took, right? So it's not that you should not get massages at all, it's that you shouldn't rely on massages. Massages are super relaxed and be great just for your mental and emotional health. And they can relieve pain. So if you're in extreme pain, sure, get a massage. But that's not gonna solve your back pain. What's gonna solve your back pain is actually doing the active work, doing the working out, doing the rehabilitation that requires you to do the work. That's gonna cause permanent tissue change. That's gonna strengthen the muscles that need to be strengthened. That's gonna loosen the muscles that need to be loosened. And that's going to bring blood flow to the areas that are injured so that they can actually regenerate, so that they can actually heal. And the fifth mistake is what I like to call permatorque syndrome, or anterior pelvic tilt. You've probably heard this term before, but permatorque or anterior pelvic tilt is this condition where the hip girdle tilts forward like this, okay? And you can see it almost looks like I'm twerking on camera. I had no idea how it would ever come down. This anterior pelvic tilt is when the hip girdle tilts forward, and it kind of stays that way. And this is not a really good position to be in. And these lower back muscles are tightening as I'm standing here right now. And so a lot of people, without knowing, have this anterior pelvic tilt. They have this permatorque where their hips are popped forward and it looks like your butt's popping out. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that when you're doing your lifting and just when you're standing around throughout the day, you correct this by tucking your hips underneath your rib cage. So we have our rib cage here, we have our hip girdle here. We don't want this to be out of alignment. We want the hips to rest underneath the rib cage. And so now I have this actual straight column of structure, which is more stable. And the way you do this is really simple. All you have to do is think about squeezing your glutes. So literally you can stand up right now, and if you go from here, you stand straight and you just squeeze your glutes, it'll tuck your hips underneath your rib cage, and you have a more solid structure that's gonna be less prone to injury, less prone to pain, less prone to instability. So those are 5 subtle mistakes that cause chronic back pain. And if you feel like another issue might be the 40-pound weight vest that you're carrying around your gut, then watch one of these videos on how to permanently lose fat, or go to defaultkings.com for help.